Hello guys, we're back again, yeah? Hello! Welcome! Another episode of the Gaming Dadcast. Glad to have you here. Today, we're going to be talking about crashing through my first difficult game, and we're going to be talking about competitive games and those players who can't handle losing. Oh boy, let's get to it, yeah? Back in 1995, my father had retired from his construction job he had worked for. He retired and did the one thing he wanted to do the most: get away from as many people as possible. One random day in 6th grade, my class had a party. Before I realized, the teacher stated it was for me. I was so confused. She said, "Let's all say goodbye to Michael and we wish him the best on his new adventure." Kids started coming up to me and saying their goodbyes, even those who bullied me. I didn't understand what was happening. Then, about 30 minutes later, my dad showed up to the class. He was there way earlier than when school typically ended. He found me, walked over, and asked, "Okay, you ready to hit the road?" My dad decided to move both of us from Sacramento, the only home I had ever known, all the way to the northern part of California in Humboldt County. What better way to get away from most people than to move out into the mountains? Fun fact, if you look up the Netflix show Murder Mountain, that is literally where I grew up. I passed right by the mountain every day on my way to school. My dad might have told me we would be moving and I simply didn't hear or understand, but this was a sudden, shocking turn of events. In an instant, I was pulled away from familiarity and thrown into the unknown. During this time, the thing I could cling on to the most for that sense of security and familiarity was my PS1. It reminded me of a time I was back home, in my room, away from any stress. Over the next year, the PS1 really helped me to calm down while I adapted to this whole new world. New school, new area, new people, same old bullies. I was just trying to fit in the best way I could. We still hadn't gotten our room, our own place yet. Yes, you heard that right. My dad had moved us across the state, and we were living with some friends of his while we found property to buy and build a house on. His friends had grandchildren, and they stayed over most of the time. The cool thing was that they also had a PS1, so they bought games for themselves. This meant we could double our library. I would get one game while they would get another. Once we were finished with our own, we would swap and try the other. It worked really well, and it led to a game that taught me about perseverance, something I really needed while adapting to this foreign land I had found myself in. This is crashing through my first difficult game. I had just finished a game. I think it may have been Croc. And my friends had just finished theirs. So it was time to make the game swap. What game did I get out of this temporary trade? Crash Bandicoot. I had seen commercials for the game. This was the Mario killer that PlayStation was, touting. With excitement, I popped the game disc into the PS1 and booted it up. I will never forget playing this cool 3D game with different perspectives. It was so different than any games I had played before. It was so hard to grasp not seeing what was in front of Crash while the camera focused on his front. But I didn't care. It was such a cool new thing. I learned to get through it, and before long, I had completed a few levels. I thought this game would be a breeze, and it would just turn into a collectathon, which I was totally fine with. But something changed that I did not expect. Crash Bandicoot is notorious for being difficult. You could say the cause was the controls or perhaps the gameplay mechanics. Some would say it was simply the level design. Others would say it was the wonky spacing. Sometimes you could land on a ledge, while other times it seems you would fall right through the ledge. I think it was a combination of all of these points. But regardless, the game got tough. It didn't help that I was also very OCD when it came to getting all the boxes and gems in each level. Then there were the time trials. I wouldn't move on until I fully completed a level, so the difficulty came very early for me as I tried to get everything I could in each level I progressed to. I had played difficult games before, but they weren't like Crash Bandicoot. I believe another part of why this is the first real difficult game I played is because I was very aware of it being difficult. Other games I played in the past that were difficult, I simply just moved on from, so I never fully realized how hard they were to complete. This game, though, I had to beat it, and I had to get everything. Play a level, die. Play the same level, die. Play, die. Play, die. This cycle happened on every level after the first few. This was also the first game I rage quit on. Many times I quit after dying so close to the finish line in a level, and I would later regret it. I mean, this was the time of memory cards and saving manually. I'd rage quit, come back later, and start the new gaming session already filled with anger because of my stupid reaction from the previous play session. This was also the first game that I threw a controller on the ground in anger. Something to note here. I've only ever done this a few times as I'm very particular about taking care of my stuff. This game was rage-inducing enough for me to throw my controller and walk away at least once. Many games have been able to do, I've been able to complete, get angry, and be fine with. There were times I would question why I was even playing the game, or if I was still having, any fun. I'd ask, am I having fun? Crash Bandicoot made me realize that I do find satisfaction in overcoming adversity in games, even though it may have seemed otherwise if you were looking on the outside. I don't remember which level specifically, and I don't recall what had happened that day, but I was having a particularly rough day, and I had just gotten home from school. I hurriedly finished my homework, made my way over to the TV, and plopped down on the couch. However, I hesitated after grabbing the controller. I'm already in a bad mood. So should I play this? Won't I get even more angry? I wasn't sure what I should do, but something clicked inside me. I was determined to make progress, no matter what. I proceeded to load up the game, and it definitely wasn't the fairy tale start. I died multiple times and made no progress, but my reaction wasn't the same. I had a calm about me that was new. I pushed through the bad runs and managed to complete a level. I went back, made sure I collected all the boxes, all gems, then did the time trial. One by one, levels began to fall to me as I progressed further into the game. When I finally stopped to go eat and do other things, I had a new feeling. It wasn't calm nor anger. It was a feeling of accomplishment and that pride of knowing I did it. It didn't matter that I failed over and over. It only mattered that I was able to complete it. This completely changed my day around, and all the things that caused me grief earlier just disappeared into the background. Over the next week or so, I went on to complete the game and get everything I could. It got a little easier for me, but not much. I still failed all the way to the end, but finished everything. And that's all that mattered to me. I pushed through, I persevered to get to the goal I had set for myself. Nothing could stop me, and I learned something that cannot simply be taught. It is something that has to be instilled by going through difficulty. Yes, it was just a game, and ultimately didn't matter, but it was the water for the seedling that would grow within me as I got older. That perseverance grew and reached into other parts of my life, parts that mattered way more. About a year later, after finishing Crash Bandicoot, my dad informed me that my mom was in a coma. He and my mom had been divorced for a year by this point. Her two children and myself were given the choice to either pull her off of life support machine to see if her body would stabilize or keep her on the machine. If she were to awaken, the damage she endured within her brain would essentially mean she wouldn't be truly alive. No speech, no movement, no cognitive reactions. I didn't want that. One of her kids and I, so my sister, half sister, and I decided to pull her off the machine. And so the doctors did. She passed away, and I would continue my life without a mother. I persevered later on when other bullies would try to tear me down. There were so many other things in life that I would face later on where this stupid little game, this difficult thing, instilled the spirit of perseverance in me that I would simply not give up. I now see this in both of my boys. They get so angry when they lose. They face when they face sickness. They went through a pandemic and lockdown. They've been through so much in their short lives, and I watch them slowly learn to persist. The games they play, even though they're ultimately just games, help them to learn that they won't always win, and that's okay. Nobody's perfect, and nobody wins 100% of the time. To strive for perfection is great, but attaining perfection is simply unrealistic. It's okay to lose. Just persevere. All right, so now let's do a little talk about competitive gaming, shall we? When I was younger, I actually didn't care much for competitive games. Fighting games, racing games, racing against other people, testing my skills against another. I don't know. It wasn't my cup of tea. I wasn't drawn to them. I see my oldest son, though, and he gets bored with anything outside of competition. Competitive gaming has grown in my lifetime, and it will continue to do so moving forward. Sure, the landscape may change, but the core of competition in competitive gaming will remain. MOBAs, shooters, team-based games, battle royale games. There are so many types of competitive games, it's easy to get into. Add to this the ability to stream for others while you play has amplified this. Just take a look at Twitch. As I've gotten older, I wouldn't say I'm a huge online multiplayer kind of guy, but I do enjoy some of them immensely. Rocket League, Overwatch, and Splatoon 3 are a few of them. Though I'm not a competitive gamer by any definition, I ultimately believe they're a needed aspect of the gaming world. They offer interaction and a way for certain games to remain fresh because the experience changes from game to game. It's like sports. No two games are ever the same. Sure, they may be similar, but they're never exactly the same, and this is why I love watching sports like basketball, soccer, and others. But one thing that has really been front and center for me over the past couple years is how someone deals with losing. This is manifested for me in my oldest son. He loves competitive games and gets bored with anything other than that. What happens when he loses? One thing I've had to make very clear to him is that there has to be a loser. If you can win at something, that means others have to lose. He's also only 8 years old, and I remind him almost daily that he is a way more talented player than I was at his age. But he demands and expects absolute perfection from himself. This is a gift as long as it is paired with endurance and perseverance. Turns into a curse when all you can do is tear yourself down after losing, and that is what we are currently fighting against. Like the old cartoon saying, knowledge is power. This rings very true, and many times when he goes into something that I can foresee turning into a loss for him, I remind him that the only thing that is truly a loss is not following through. Win, lose, do well, do poorly. The only thing that matters is that he follows through and does his best. Cliche, I know, but it's cliche for a reason. Going into something, there is a possibility, knowing there's a possibility that you may lose helps to prepare him for what may come. More often than not, when I prep him with this, he handles losses a little bit better. But I think it's also important to not just succumb to loss from the start. Going into a competitive game with the mindset that there has to be a loser is different than going in expecting to lose. Expecting to lose before the match even begins, in my book, that's an instant loss. So I also have to remind him that perfection is unattainable. We are human, we make mistakes, and that is okay. I've had to tell him this very thing many times, and I've had to tell myself this many times throughout my life, and many times others have had to remind me. This applied to so many events in my life. It's crazy. Knowing that I'm not perfect and do not make mistakes helped to realize, release a little bit of weight off of my shoulders, even if I didn't realize while in the middle of my obstacles. So when I see my son struggling with competitive games, I remained telling him that, the mistakes, it's okay. It's okay. It's a common phrase I use with him. It is okay. Anyway, it's not enough to stop there. Yes, we make mistakes and will continue to do so, but that doesn't mean we don't aim for perfection. This is something that unites us, and I hope one day he truly realizes that. We fall short, sure, but we persist to get better and better. This gives life constant new meaning, and there are always surprises to be had. Competition helps to define this further. Since no two matches are the same, it may seem similar, but they aren't. The most recent tactic I've taken with my son when playing a game that pushes his skills is to try something new. He was playing a game the other day and he got completely wiped out. He began to say that he sucked, he's the worst, maybe he should quit playing games. I told him first to cut himself some slack because he isn't perfect. I also let him know that I have failed and I continue to fail, even being a longtime gamer. Then I suggest to try something new, a different tactic. Look at things from a new angle, or just simply try something new to see if anything works. Sometimes it doesn't, but other times I can see the light bulb click on above his head. I swear, he gets that feeling that he did it, learned something new, and to not just simply give up and stop. Kind of like when he was getting that platinum for Bug Snacks. He almost stopped, but he looked at it from a different perspective. So, I hate losing. My sons hate losing. I mean, I still have yet to meet someone who loved to lose. Losing is a part of life, and it is definitely a part of competitive gaming. The real question is not will I lose, or even when will I lose, it's how will I react to losing. This is so tough for me, and it's tough for my kids. Again, I imagine this is tough for a lot of people. I always try to hit home to my sons that I don't really focus on whether they win or lose, but how they react to either. I can't say I don't care if they win or lose. I want them to win, but that isn't how life works. So it's more important to me to instill in them the best way to react each way in what works for them. Some people take a period of time to mope or be angry, then just move on. Others let it fuel their drive for the next game. Still others may have no outward reaction at all. The only reaction I cannot abide is tearing yourself down, especially without a following self-buildup. It's always a tough conversation, and my son is very much like me. When I fail, I internally take it hard. The difference is that he is very outward with his emotions. We both default to purely thinking that we suck at whatever it is that we lost at, even when that's not necessarily true. Sometimes when playing a game, the other team is just simply better. It doesn't mean I suck. It just means I lost. How I react to that loss is a huge deal, and I always try to take it in stride. Hopefully, my sons will do the same. I guess time will tell. It's really tough for me, especially with my oldest son, to guide my kids through losses. I mean, how do I say, hey, it's all right to fail at this thing that you love? I can only stay positive and show perseverance and to the best of my ability while being my kid's biggest supporter. And that's just what I'm just going to have to keep doing. Like I mentioned in my previous story, perseverance isn't something one learns like a skill. It's learned through trial and most likely error. It sucks having to watch my kids lose at the things that they love to do. I mean, it sucks for me, but watching those that I love have to go through the same thing, I can safely say, I hate it. I hate it. But it's necessary, I think. I've seen it happen a few times now with both my kids, but that sudden understanding of persistence happens in both competitive and non competitive games. I watched my youngest struggle in sections of Mario Odyssey, and I explained to him how he needed to do it, but didn't help right away. I sat there, tried to coach him through it, and at first I ended up doing it for him. However, after a few more times, he got through one difficult section, and I could see it on his face. He didn't get it the first time, but because he kept trying, he was able to push through. With my oldest, I saw it with the game Multiverses. He was playing and losing and started to have a bit of a meltdown. I reminded him to calm down and take his time before getting frustrated. I did not tell him to not feel angry or frustrated, but rather give it free rein and then move past it. He was able to move past the loss and go to another match. It's tough having to not just jump in immediately, and for more important things, I would definitely jump in. Don't get me wrong. But these little trials through gaming are hopefully helping to build perseverance in them. One final point I want to bring up that I've told my kids before, and honestly myself, is that simply not playing competitive games is an option. If they aren't your thing, that's totally fine. Don't force something that just causes that much stress and anxiety and grief. Don't force it. Life will give you enough of those on a daily basis. It's got you covered. But when you commit to something, don't just give up. When trying to force something, stopping is fine, but just giving up when there are still options to try, I don't know, maybe this is bad thinking, but I feel finishing what you start is a big deal. You don't have to do it again, but at least following through with something gives a sense of responsibility and ownership in a way. For example, if you play a competitive game that you really want to enjoy, but simply just don't, finish your match and just stop playing. Move on to another game or do something else. But finishing that last match gives the message, I did what I needed to do. Then get out and do something you like. Obviously, the world is much more gray than this, and competitive gaming is no different. So each situation will require a different approach. Do what you enjoy, and don't get completely discouraged if you happen to fail or lose at it. That's easier said than done, right? Anyway, that's it. That's the end of the episode. So I'd love to hear from you. You can email me, bowertendo@gmail.com. Find me on Twitch. Find me on Twitter, bowertendo, all around. You can leave comments down below if you're watching the video. I want to hear. So, what's a game that you have played that has been just, it tested you and it pushed you, and maybe you didn't make it through, but maybe you did. What's a game that did that for you? I'm willing to bet a lot of people are going to say From Software games. Probably. But what's a game that did that for you? And do you play competitive games or competitive board games, competitive games like sports, video games? And how do you react? What are your thoughts on this? Am I just completely off my rocker here? Maybe I'm not. I don't know. Anyway, thanks for sticking around this long. Thanks for listening. Thanks for watching. Appreciate you. And until next time, see ya!